Long before the first wave crashed against the shores of Tsushima, a vast empire was rising from the steppes of Central Asia. The Mongols, unstoppable, unified and burning with ambition, had already conquered half the known world. But when they turned their gaze to Japan, they would encounter a defiance they'd never seen before. In the early 13th century, the world watched in awe and terror as a storm brewed on the vast steppes of Central Asia. It began not with an empire, but with a man, Temujin, born into a life of hardship and betrayal, who would rise to become Genghis Khan, the greatest conqueror the world had ever seen. Under his unyielding leadership, disparate Mongol tribes were united into a disciplined war machine. With revolutionary tactics, expert horse archery, and psychological warfare, the Mongols exploded outward, conquering territory from China to the Caspian Sea. Cities fell like dominoes, empires crumbled. No one was safe from the reach of the Khan. By the time of his death in 1227, Genghis Khan had laid the foundations of a transcontinental empire. But it was his descendants, especially Kublai Khan, the founder of the Yuan dynasty in China, who would carry his ambitions across oceans. The Mongol military was unlike anything the world had seen. Mobility was its greatest weapon. Warriors traveled light, riding swift horses and launching surprise attacks that shattered traditional armies. Commanders used sophisticated battlefield communication and elaborate feints to lure enemies into traps. Even cities with massive walls, like those in Persia or northern China, fell through relentless sieges backed by Chinese and Persian engineers, skilled in siege engines, trebuchets, and early forms of gunpowder. The Mongols did not conquer merely for territory. They sought submission. Resistance was met with annihilation. Cooperation, on the other hand, was often rewarded. This cold, calculated pragmatism allowed them to build an empire that stretched from Korea to Hungary. By the mid-13th century, Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis, emerged as the most powerful of the Mongol rulers. Having conquered the Song dynasty in southern China, he declared himself emperor of the Yuan dynasty, ruling from his glittering court in Khanbalik, modern-day Beijing. But Kublai's ambitions didn't end on the mainland. He set his sights on the island nation of Japan, an unconquered land whose samurai lords had never bowed to a foreign emperor. Kublai, accustomed to submission through diplomacy or force, believed Japan could be brought into the Mongol fold. What he didn't expect was a resistance so fierce it would become legend. At this time, Japan was ruled by the Kamakura shogunate, a military government headed by the shogun and his loyal Hojo regents. While the emperor remained a ceremonial figure in Kyoto, true power lay with the warrior class in Kamakura. Samurai culture, rooted in loyalty, bushido, and martial prowess, was thriving. But Japan was politically fragmented, and while they were fierce warriors, they had never faced a threat like the Mongols. The clash between these two worlds, Mongol Empire and Samurai Japan, was inevitable. The rise of the Mongol Empire was unstoppable, but as Kublai Khan looked across the sea toward Japan, he was about to learn that not all islands submit to the tide. Stay tuned for Chapter 2, the first invasion of Japan, where diplomacy fails and the world's most terrifying empire launches its first amphibious assault on the samurai. Like, comment, and subscribe to join us as we dive into history's most epic invasion story and discover how this war shaped legends like Ghost of Tsushima. Or don't. Thanks for watching. While the Mongol Empire expanded across Asia like an unstoppable force, the island nation of Japan remained largely isolated, culturally proud, politically fractured, and unaware that history's most terrifying war machine was setting its gaze across the sea. This is the story of Japan before the storm, a land of samurai, spiritual fervor, and a fragile military government about to face the ultimate test. In the 13th century, Japan was ruled not by an emperor, but by a military government, the Kamakura shogunate. After the Genpei War and the fall of the Taira clan in 1185, power shifted to the victorious Minamoto clan. Minamoto no Yoritomo established the first shogunate in Kamakura, far from the imperial court in Kyoto. Yoritomo's death in 1199 triggered a struggle for succession. His wife's clan, the Hojo, leveraging their existing influence, skillfully maneuvered to fill the void. They gradually consolidated power, initially through regency for Yoritomo's young and ultimately ineffectual sons, and then by formally assuming the position of Shikken, the shogunate regent, effectively governing in the name of a figurehead shogun, but cracks were already forming in their governance, as rival clans waited and schemed for more power. Though the shogunate ruled politically, it was the samurai who defined the spirit of the age. These warrior elites had been hardened by centuries of internal strife and clan warfare. Their loyalty was pledged to their lord, and their code of conduct, later formalized as Bushido, emphasized bravery, honor, and a willingness to die in service. But samurai warfare was intensely personal. Duels, ritual declarations of name and lineage, and heroic last stands were common. This was a far cry from the disciplined formations and volley fire tactics of the Mongols. When the invaders came, Japan's warriors would have to adapt or die. Despite the strength of the samurai class, Japan was not prepared for foreign invasion. Its coastal defenses were minimal, with few fortified ports or garrisons along Kyushu, the likely point of entry. The Japanese military command was focused inward, on maintaining order, suppressing local uprisings, and protecting the interests of the shogunate. Some temples and shrines recorded strange omens and celestial signs in the years before the invasions, but few could imagine that fleets of foreign warships would soon darken the horizon. In 1268, the first warnings came not from the sky but from the sea. Ambassadors from the Mongol Empire, bearing letters from Kublai Khan himself, arrived in Dazaifu with demands for submission. The Mongols had already conquered Korea and forced the Goryeo court to build ships and supply troops for future invasions. Japan offered no clear response. The imperial court was indecisive, and the shogunate, though wary, was hesitant to act too soon. Amid this political uncertainty, a young regent named Hojo Tokimune was beginning to assert himself. Though only in his 20s, Tokimune was destined to become the most powerful man in Japan during this crisis. While the court debated and the provinces remained distracted, Tokimune quietly began laying the groundwork for defense, strengthening coastal watchtowers, commissioning monk advisors, and preparing for the worst. Ultimately, Japan refused to send envoys or tribute, and by doing so, they signed their fate. Japan's samurai were proud, brave, and untested against the outside world. The Kamakura shogunate, under the Hojo, believed its rule unshakable. But across the East China Sea, the Mongol Empire was already drawing up plans for invasion. Next episode, we'll witness the terrifying moment the Mongols struck, the first invasion of 1274. Please like, comment, and subscribe to join us on this epic journey. Or not. Thanks for watching. In the autumn of 1274, the seas off Kyushu darkened, not from storms, but from sails. The Mongol Empire, unstoppable on land, ruthless at sea, had arrived. For the first time in its history, Japan faced a foreign invasion. What followed would shatter centuries of warrior tradition, introduce terrifying new tactics, and test the very soul of the samurai. This is the story of Japan's trial by storm. By late 1274, a combined Mongol, Chinese and Korean armada of 900 ships carrying over 20,000 soldiers set sail. The Korean kingdom of Goryeo, now a Mongol vassal, was forced to provide vessels, supplies and troops. The invasion plan was straightforward: strike fast at the Japanese islands of Tsushima, Iki, and then Kyushu's northern coast. Kublai expected swift surrender, but Japan was no longer ignoring the threat. Before the Great Storm reached the heart of Japan, its first devastating waves crashed upon the islands that lay as a thin line of defense in the Korean Strait. Among them was Tsushima, a small outpost destined to become the initial test of Japan's stand against the tides. On the morning of October 5, 1274, the calm of Tsushima was shattered by the sight of a vast Mongol fleet, the vanguard of Kublai Khan's invasion. Leading the island's meager defenses was So Sukekuni, the island's Jito, governor, and commander of the local garrison. Under his command was Saito Sukesada, a prominent Tsushima samurai, and a small force consisting of perhaps 80 to a few hundred local samurai and armed peasants, overwhelmingly outnumbered by the invaders. Battle tradition dictated Sukekuni to send envoys to the enemy camp to hear their demands. However, his messengers were met with arrows, a disgraceful act that was difficult for an honorable samurai to understand. For the Mongols, the Khan's order was simple: surrender or die. They did not come to negotiate. They came to annihilate. The ensuing battle at Komoda Beach vividly highlighted the stark contrast in military doctrines. While the Japanese samurai traditionally favored individual combat, often engaging in ritualistic challenges before entering the fray, the Mongols fought as a cohesive unit. They employed disciplined formations, massed volleys of fire arrows, explosive projectiles, and the psychological impact of their fearsome reputation. These tactics were designed to overwhelm rather than engage in single combat. Saito Sukesada, Sukekuni's samurai, reportedly engaged directly with the Mongol Koryo forces, displaying immense personal bravery which earned him folklore status. Accounts describe him fighting valiantly, killing off 25 invaders, and at one point slaying a Mongol general, even after being struck and wounded by a projectile from a Mongol catapult. Centuries later, Sukesada's sacrifice would echo through pop culture, inspiring the fictional tale of Jin Sakai in the popular game, Ghost of Tsushima. The sheer weight of numbers and the disciplined collective tactics of the invaders proved insurmountable. So Sukekuni, along with virtually all his samurai and the island's defending forces, fell in battle, their final stand marking the complete subjugation of Tsushima. The fall of Tsushima served as a grim and immediate warning to mainland Japan. The defenders' stand, though a military defeat, quickly became a powerful symbol of samurai defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. It also demonstrated the ferocity of the Mongol threat and illuminated the critical vulnerabilities of Japan's traditional, individualized fighting style against a unified, technologically advanced army. News from Tsushima galvanized the Hojo Regency of the Kamakura shogunate, underlining the urgent need for a more comprehensive and centralized defensive strategy. The Mongol fleet had drawn first blood, but across the water, the samurai were beginning to understand the enemy and prepare for vengeance. Don't miss Chapter 4 as the Mongol war machine sails on. Please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Or not. Thanks for watching. The sea was not yet still. Fires still flickered on the shores of Tsushima as the Mongol fleet pressed southward, unstopped and undeterred. Their next destination loomed ahead, the island of Iki, a small but defiant outpost nestled between Tsushima and the Kyushu mainland. It would be the next crucible in a campaign already soaked in blood. As Tsushima fell, the Mongol fleet wasted no time. Their next target, Iki, a stepping stone to the mainland. Nearly 1,000 ships cut through the Genghis Sea, bearing tens of thousands of warriors, Mongol, Chinese, Korean, soldiers of an empire that had never known defeat. The date was November 14, 1274. By nightfall, Iki would bleed. At the heart of Iki's defense stood Taira no Kagetaka, an aging but determined official charged with overseeing the island. A member of the once powerful Taira clan, humbled and broken decades earlier in the Genpei War by the Minamoto, Kagetaka bore not only the weight of the Mongol threat, but also the memory of his clan's former glory. He knew he would not be rescued. He knew this would be his last stand. As the Mongol fleet landed on November 14, 1274, their forces unleashed the same relentless strategy seen at Tsushima, mass formations of archers, gunpowder bombs, and iron discipline in their ranks. The defenders had no answer for this storm of arrows and fire. Outnumbered and outgunned, Kagetaka fell back to Hinotsume Castle, a modest hilltop fortress never intended to repel a full-scale invasion. The sky was blackened with smoke, the air filled with screams. Realizing the end was near, Kagetaka made a final, heartbreaking decision. He attempted to send his young daughter away to the mainland, entrusting her to a loyal samurai retainer. Sadly, Mongol archers spotted them and fired at their ship, killing his daughter. The samurai, however, survived and eventually reached Hakata Bay in mainland Kyushu. There he reported the bloodbath happening in Iki Island. Surrounded by enemies, the defenders held as long as they could. Some sources claim Kagetaka killed his own family before falling on his sword, a final act of defiance rooted in the grim honor code of Bushido. The Mongols overwhelmed the castle. Those who resisted were slaughtered. Those who surrendered fared little better. The Mongols left nothing but ruin. Homes were burned. Villagers were massacred. Iki was silenced, not as a military conquest but as a warning. Yet, in Kamakura, the message had the opposite effect. Japan was awakening. The Mongols had revealed their nature, not conquerors but destroyers, and Japan would not go quietly. The fall of Iki, marked by such profound devastation and the sacrifice of Taira no Kagetaka, solidified the terrifying reality of the Mongol threat. It was the second, undeniable warning to the Japanese mainland that their traditional defenses and individual valor might not be enough against an enemy so ruthless and technologically advanced. The path to the heart of Japan was now clear. The Mongols had secured their staging grounds, and the mainland awaited its inevitable invasion. How would the Japanese respond to this unprecedented terror? Join us in Chapter 5 as the full might of the Mongol invasion force finally descends upon Hakata Bay. Please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below, or don't. Thanks for watching. The sea was calm, but Japan stood on the edge of a blade. The Mongols had burned their way across Tsushima and Iki, leaving horror in their wake. Now, they faced their true objective, the shores of Kyushu. But the samurai were waiting, bloodied, outnumbered, yet unbroken. What followed at Hakata Bay would become the first great clash between two military worlds, and the start of a storm that would shake both heaven and earth. After the fall of Iki, the Mongol fleet set sail for Chikuzen province, the gateway to the mainland. Their target, Hakata Bay, a vital port near the administrative center of Dazaifu. Warnings arrived ahead of the fleet, delivered by survivors from Iki and the remnants of Kyushu's border defenses. Hojo Tokimune, Shikan of the Kamakura shogunate, had already ordered warriors from across western Japan to assemble at Hakata. Though coordination was poor and reinforcements scattered, the local Gokunin rallied. The defensive plan was simple: engage the Mongols at the shoreline and keep them from establishing a beachhead. The Mongols landed on November 19, 1274, unleashing overwhelming firepower. Drums thundered, rockets lit the skies. Chinese and Korean foot soldiers advanced in tight formations, while mounted Mongol archers rained arrows from behind. The samurai, following traditions of individual combat, rode out one by one, calling for duels. But the Mongols didn't play by those rules. They advanced as a unit, cutting down lone riders with brutal efficiency. It was the first time the Japanese had seen gunpowder weapons, small bombs, grenades, and smoke projectiles that stunned horses and disoriented men. The battlefield turned into chaos. Horses bolted. Warriors were blown apart. The Mongols pressed forward. But the Japanese were learning. After the initial shock, group-based fighting began to emerge. Samurai archers formed ranks, and foot soldiers moved to intercept Mongol columns. Fighting centered around Hakata Bay, where the beaches narrowed and terrain favored the defenders. Shoni Kagesuke, one of the few high-ranking commanders from the region, led a fierce resistance near the port. His men, many of them veterans from earlier skirmishes, launched flanking attacks against Mongol supply lines, slowing their momentum. The Mongols burned the town of Hakata, but couldn't push inland. As dusk fell, the invaders withdrew to their ships, planning to regroup for a second assault the next day. It never came. That night, the sea turned. A sudden typhoon, later revered as the kamikaze or divine wind, rolled into Hakata Bay. Anchored Mongol ships, tightly clustered in unfamiliar waters, were battered by wind and waves. Many were destroyed outright. Others ran aground. Japanese small craft harassed survivors as they floundered in the surf. With casualties mounting and no secure foothold, the Mongol generals gave the order to retreat. After barely a week of fighting, the mighty Yuan expedition, backed by the wealth of China and the ambition of Kublai Khan, was gone. The first Mongol invasion of 1274, thwarted by the divine wind, left an indelible mark on Japan. It cemented the belief that Japan was a land protected by the gods, fostering a strong sense of national destiny and spiritual invincibility. Militarily, it forced the samurai to acknowledge the need for collective tactics, improved fortifications, and the development of more effective responses to foreign invasion. While the direct threat receded, the experience spurred a period of intense preparation for a feared second invasion, which indeed came in 1281. In the next chapter, we enter the interwar years, where politics, faith, and fear reshape Japan. Comment below, like, share, and subscribe to support this channel. Or don't. Thanks for watching. The sea was quiet again, but no one believed it would stay that way. The Mongols had come, and they had left, but not because Japan had defeated them. Their retreat had been a matter of weather and timing, not conquest. And everyone in Kamakura knew the truth. The storm would return. For 7 years, Japan waited and prepared. In the aftermath of the Battle of Hakata Bay, Hojo Tokimune, the young regent, Shikken, of the Kamakura shogunate, emerged as the central figure of resistance. No longer content to simply react, he began tightening the reins of power. Tokimune strengthened the military command structure, demanded loyalty from regional Gokunin, and centralized decision-making in the shogunate's hands. He knew the Mongols were not finished. Intelligence from the continent confirmed it. Kublai Khan was building something far larger. In private, Tokimune turned inward. A devout Zen Buddhist, he reportedly asked his master for guidance. The monk replied, "Let your mind settle and face death without flinching." Tokimune responded not with meditation, but with swords and ships. In 1275, the shogunate ordered the construction of a massive defensive wall stretching across Hakata Bay, a 20-kilometer stone and earth fortification known later as the Genko Borui. It wasn't just a physical wall, it was a message. Japan would never again meet the invaders on open beaches. The wall stood about 2 meters high, reinforced with stone and packed earth, and designed to repel ships from landing easily. Crews worked under threat of invasion, knowing time was short. Across Kyushu, villages were mobilized, stockpiling weapons, boats, and armor. Samurai trained in new formations, archers drilled in groups. For the first time, Japan began preparing for total war. Kublai Khan was not idle. Outraged by his fleet's failure, he sent a second embassy in 1275, this time not asking for submission, but demanding it. Tokimune's response was swift and cold. The Mongol envoys were beheaded in Kamakura. Their heads were sent to Kyushu as a warning. Kublai responded in kind. He ordered the construction of a second invasion fleet, larger, more brutal, and better coordinated. It would be a two-pronged assault, one from Korea, one from southern China. The next time the Mongols came, it would not be an expedition. It would be an annihilation. The years between 1276 and 1281 were filled with dread. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed massive fleets were already at sea. Others believed divine retribution would protect the land. In the temples of Kamakura and Kyoto, monks prayed for divine wind. In the hills of Kyushu, warriors sharpened their swords and memorized the shape of the coast. But the wait was long and costly. Samurai families, unpaid during peacetime, grew restless. The shogunate's resources were stretched thin, struggling to reward those who had fought at Hakata. Tension grew between central authority and regional lords. Victory in 1274 had brought no spoils, only fear. And yet, Japan endured. The wall stood. The country held its breath. In the shadow of the first invasion, Japan did not crumble. It hardened. The walls of Hakata rose. The samurai learned and were no longer warriors of duels. And in the heart of Kamakura, a young regent prepared to stare death in the face. In our next chapter, the second invasion of 1281, the largest amphibious assault the world had ever seen. Please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below, or don't. Thanks for watching. The Mongols came back, this time not with a fleet, but with an armada. Over 4,000 ships, more than 140,000 men. 2 invasion forces from 2 directions. The Mongol Empire, at the height of its power, had one objective: crush Japan completely. But Japan had changed. The samurai had adapted. The wall at Hakata stood tall, and above them all, a storm was building, one not even Kublai Khan could command. In 1281, the Mongols launched their most ambitious invasion yet, a 2-front attack. The Eastern Route Army, consisting of around 900 ships and 40,000 troops, sailed from Korea. The Southern Route Army, over 100,000 strong with more than 3,500 ships, departed from southern China. Their plan was to rendezvous at Iki and strike Hakata Bay together, overwhelming Japan with sheer numbers. But this coordination would prove their greatest weakness. The Eastern Route Army arrived first, reaching Hakata Bay in June 1281. But unlike 1274, they found no exposed villages or scattered defenders. They found a fortified coastline, organized samurai, and stone walls that stopped landings cold. The defenders launched night raids in small boats, boarding Mongol ships under cover of darkness, setting fires and killing crews. Samurai boarded Mongol vessels with grappling hooks and fought hand-to-hand on deck. These weren't scattered duels. This was coordinated guerrilla warfare at sea. The Mongols were forced to withdraw and wait offshore for reinforcements from the Southern Route Army. But the Southern Army was delayed. Bad weather, disease, and logistical nightmares plagued their journey, and Japan kept attacking. For over a month, the Eastern Mongol force lingered offshore, unable to make landfall. On the shore, the Genko-Barui Wall stretched the length of the bay. It blocked cavalry and forced any landing party into narrow kill zones. Arrows rained down. Samurai archers and Ashigaru spearmen waited behind every break in the stones. Shoni Kagasuke and other Kyushu commanders led rotating attacks from land and sea, wearing the Mongols down. The Japanese used small, fast boats, called sekibune, to swarm and harass the anchored fleet, burning ships with flaming arrows and ramming them with fire-laden rafts. It became a slow war of attrition. By mid-August, both Mongol forces had finally merged near Imari Bay. It was now or never. But nature had other plans. A massive typhoon struck the Mongol fleet with terrifying force, stronger than in 1274. Thousands of ships were smashed against rocks or capsized, soldiers drowned by the tens of thousands. Others were cut down as they crawled ashore. Contemporary accounts describe the sea filled with corpses and wreckage. Survivors who washed up on the beaches were hunted by local militias. It was annihilation. Nearly half the Mongol invasion force perished. The greatest naval assault in world history had ended in total failure. The Japanese called it kamikaze, the divine wind. They believed the gods had saved them, and in a way they had. But what truly turned the tide was years of preparation, the resilience of the samurai, and a coastline ready for war. The second Mongol invasion was the last time Kublai Khan would ever threaten Japan. Crushed by storms, sabotage, and stubborn resistance, the empire retreated into silence. But the echoes of that storm would shape the soul of a nation. In our final chapter, the myths, the memory, and the legacy of the Mongol invasions, from samurai folklore to modern games like Ghost of Tsushima. Subscribe and join us for the conclusion of this incredible story, or don't. Thanks for watching.
Two invasions, two storms, two miracles, or so it seemed. The Mongol Empire, at the height of its power, threw everything it had at Japan, and failed, not once, but twice. The winds came, the fleet was shattered, and Japan was spared. But this is more than a story of war. It's the story of what came after, the stories they told, the identity they forged, and the ghosts that still walk the shores of Hakata and Tsushima. The Mongols never returned. After the failed invasion of 1281, Kublai Khan faced mounting unrest in China, rebellion in Vietnam, and a collapsing supply chain. Japan became the war he could never finish, and the sea his greatest enemy. Japan, too, was left changed. Though victorious, the Kamakura shogunate was financially exhausted. Samurai who had fought in both invasions expected rewards, but there were no new lands conquered, no treasure to distribute. The shogunate had defended the homeland, but gained nothing. The years that followed were filled with economic strain, internal unrest, and political decay. a slow decline that would eventually lead to the Genko War and the fall of the Kamakura regime in the 1330s. In the generations that followed, the kamikaze, or divine wind, became more than weather. It became myth, a sign that the gods themselves protected Japan. Shrines were built, scrolls were painted. Children grew up hearing tales of how the heavens had shattered the world's greatest empire. The story of divine protection seeped into Japan's national consciousness. And centuries later, in World War II, the word would be invoked again, but in a darker context. The kamikaze became the name for suicide pilots, drawing on the ancient legend of salvation through sacrifice. But the original storms were not acts of self-destruction. They were nature's gift, and Japan's ability to survive came not from the wind alone, but from the warriors who held the line until the wind could come. On the beaches of Tsushima, Iki, and Hakata Bay, echoes remain. Fishermen still find rusted Mongol arrowheads beneath the waves. The Genko Borui Wall still stretches across parts of the coastline, and in museums, helmets, scrolls, and preserved weapons tell a story of a nation that faced annihilation and endured. The samurai who fought there are long gone, but their story lingers. And in modern times, it was retold in an unexpected form, the video game Ghost of Tsushima, a fictionalized but respectful tribute to the first Mongol invasion. Through art, media, and storytelling, the Mongol invasions remain very much alive. The Mongol invasions tested Japan in every way, militarily, politically, spiritually. It marked a transition point in samurai identity, from local enforcer to national defender. It showed that unity could hold against overwhelming odds, and it proved that even an unstoppable empire could be broken by resistance, adaptation of new strategies, and the unpredictable power of nature. But more than anything, it created a memory, one powerful enough to last 700 years. A memory of storm and steel, of sacrifice and sovereignty, of the wind that rose when the world seemed lost. If this journey moved you, from the rise of Kublai Khan to the storms off Hakata Bay, then honor it by sharing it. Like, comment, and subscribe for more deep dives into Japan's samurai past. Or don't. Thanks for watching.